Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT and Oro Muscles. Today, I'm joined by Katrina Haddad, and Katrina and I are going to be diving into her journey as an athlete, overcoming multiple ACL injuries that way. So we talk about the obstacles she faced, we talk about her rehab journey, we talk about her international travel and just travel plans in general. We cover a lot of different detail and insight about who Katrina is and all the amazing stuff that she's doing and all that she's been through. This is a really great episode, and I really appreciate her time. Be sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on more episodes just like this coming soon. Enjoy. Katrina, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. For people who aren't familiar with you and all the incredible stuff you're doing at Endicott College with the hidden opponent on the athletics side, or maybe just your overall rehab journey that way, would you mind catching them up a little bit about who you are and all the great things that you do?
Yes, of course. So I'm a current junior at Endicott College. I study exercise science with a concentration in allied health. I currently manage the women's basketball team, and I started a club on campus my freshman year called the Hidden Opponent. It's a chapter of a recognized nationally known nonprofit, and it basically raises mental health awareness for student athletes. And I also tore my ACL twice, my ACL and my meniscus. First time was I got surgery in December of 2021. Actually, today's 3 years from that surgery. Fun fact.
That-
And
What are the odds? We did
I
not
know,
plan
what are the
that, by the
odds?
way.
It's crazy. And then the second time I tore it, I got my surgery on September 5th. So I'm about almost 4 months post-op of my second one.
What a journey you've been on. And I'm guessing or assuming that when you started the Hidden Opponent chapter at Endicott College, you didn't realize how important mental health was going to be for you recovering from a really daunting injury for a second time now, did you?
No, honestly, I didn't realize how much I could resonate with it until I was really a part of it. I knew some of it, but once I started it, I was like, holy crap, there's so much more to unpack.
Yeah, there really is. And even just within your own little journey that way, just what you just mentioned that way, there's a lot to unpack. And obviously, I think we're going to go for the obvious first here in relation to the ACL injuries. What happened the first time around? What happened the second time around? Walk me kind of through that rehab journey and just kind of that overall experience that you were going through that way.
For sure, yeah. So the first time I was a senior in high school, it was actually the first day of tryouts, and I was just doing a layup, my leg slipped under me, and then it just kind of tore. And I kind of just felt it dislocate, went to the ER, they said it was a calf strain, misdiagnosed me, and then I went back again because I was like, no, something's not right. Like my knee keeps moving out of place. And then that's when I got the MRI, results came, and then I got my surgery a year after. I mean, sorry, a month after. That whole first process was definitely really difficult because I just kind of had to watch my teammates play, still be there for them. I was actually the captain of the team too, and it was just hard, especially the first 3 months of my rehab was not what I wanted it to be because the PT place that I was at just wasn't meeting, I guess, the standards that I had for myself. It wasn't really challenging me enough. So I switched PT places a couple of times during my first rehab, until I found somewhere that like challenged me. But yeah, overall, that first time, I just kind of felt like, I guess, lonely, isolated because I just didn't know anybody around me who was going through the same thing. Second time, I tore it. I was actually just at like a morning basketball workout, and I was just doing a jump stop, and then my other leg gave out, my other knee did. And that was obviously shocking, but I kind of knew exactly what it was when I felt it. And I was like, okay, I know exactly what I have to do. I don't need to go to the ER right away. Like I know what this is. Like I just need to go to the sports doctor and get an MRI, and that's that. So I did. I got that, and I honestly thought that it was going to be so much harder the second time, but I think psychologically I was more prepared. Like I knew exactly what to expect, and I was just kind of controlling the controllables. And yeah, it's honestly been good since. I have a really good PT that I have stuck with, and yeah, that's kind of a little blurb.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many incredible points that you brought up. And I mean, first off, just jumping right into the misdiagnosis that way, that is one of the most common things I see in relation to ACL injuries is everyone kind of blames it on something else, whether it's the
Mhm.
hamstring or the calf, or I see a lot of people that get told they dislocated their kneecap, when in reality they tore their ACL. And I'm not 100% sure why that happens, but it seems to happen quite often that way. And this is an area where, I know that healthcare costs are up, and I know that we're trying to cut costs when and where we can, but I definitely personally advocate for people getting MRIs just to give them the clarity of knowing for a fact what happened and what to do from there that way. And obviously, it sounds like in your case, like, you knew immediately when you went back after that first one, like, this does not feel right. Like, this is not a calf strain. And a lot of athletes, they've jacked up their calves or their hamstrings before, different things that way. And you all kind of work through it, you play through it. It's different when it's something major like the ACL that way. So I certainly, unfortunately, see more misdiagnoses than I would like to. But hopefully, those kind of things get improved upon moving forward that way. And I mean, the other piece too, you mentioned just the overall mechanism, right? These are simple things. They're things that you do all the time. It's not like, based on what you said, it's not like, four people ran into you and you like toppled over or anything that way. And I'd imagine for you, it was really, really frustrating because you played basketball for a long time. You practiced for a long time. You've done that same move thousands of times. And yet one day it was like the straw to break the camel's back. And I find a lot of people end up questioning, like, why me? Why did this happen to me? And so on that way when it was such a simple thing. And I would imagine that's just such an incredibly frustrating place to be in at first following the initial injury that way.
Definitely, definitely. I think it's like because I actually rehabbed that first injury. I was like almost 2.5 years post-op that first tear. So I was doing everything that I could to prevent a second tear. And I fully had like recovered from the first one. And then like things still happen and I still ended up tearing the other one, even though I did everything that I could to, get my leg stronger.
Yeah, and you mentioned as well that after you tore your ACL the first time, that you were the captain of the team that way. So obviously you're in a leadership role and you are still having to show up and support and put on for your team that way, whatever capacity you could. What was that like? And what do you feel like that taught you about like being a leader in general when, you're not even able to step foot on the court in that case?
Oh my gosh, it was so hard. There was honestly just so many practices where I was just tearing up, like not letting them see me, not letting the coach see me. Like I was just so sad all the time, but I just had to keep showing up. Like I had to just be there and like take it as, okay, I can't physically do anything, but I can vocally, be like, "Hey, like I saw you do this cut, but maybe you should do this one," like giving them advice, getting my insight on the game, and honestly just trying to see things from a coach's perspective and just studying the game as much as I could. And also just like, I don't know, it is just doing what you can, right? Like vocally, like I said, studying the game. But it's also okay to have, I guess, sat with the emotions and sitting with the facts that like it is frustrating. So
100% agree. And I think it's great that you're able to be around your teammates and be involved, even in a limited capacity that way. I find a lot of times after someone injures their ACL, they kind of feel isolated. And I think you used that term early as well. It's really a frustrating, emotional time. There's a lot to process and a lot to take in. And I find that journey is a lot more difficult if you're going through it alone, as opposed to being surrounded by your friends and teammates and so on that way. And, plain and simple, after you injure your knee, you're probably told when you can put weight on it again, when you can bend it so far, when you can walk again, when you can run again, like all the things that you used to just up and do every single day. All of a sudden, that control piece has been ripped away from you. So I'm a huge fan of trying to give as much control back to the athlete. And if it's as simple as, hey, look, you can go to practice, like, yeah, you can't like, stand and do jump shots, but hey, maybe you could like, snag a seat, take a ball and pass it to a teammate. Like just do something to get involved with the sport that way. Or even if it's just you mentioned the coaching piece that way and looking at the game through a different set of eyes or a different lens, if you will. And I think that's really powerful, impactful stuff. It kind of makes you appreciate the opportunities you get to play a little bit more. But when you do get to play, it also, I think, keeps you mentally sharp and enhances your IQ for the game. And maybe I'm a little biased in saying that because, again, and that's what I believe. But I think that there's something really powerful about that concept of just getting athletes around their teammates, keeping them involved in the game as much as you can, even if it is a limited basis. Something always beats nothing in this regard.
Oh, I completely agree. And tagging off of that, I think coaches need to be also involved in this. And like, I honestly had wished that my coach knew how to handle it better as well, because I think a lot of coaches, right? There's a lot of injured athletes, but like find ways to get them involved. Like you said, not just sitting on the sideline, just there with their thoughts. They're thinking this and this, but maybe like helping a rebounding for a teammate if they can, or like passing, like you said, if they can. And just having that open communication will help the athletes so much more than just like ignoring that it's a thing and just like pretending like, oh, like they're gonna get over it, like whatever, like once they play, it'll be fine. It just shows that they feel like they're invaluable at that time and like they need to be recognized as being valuable and that they can still participate, like you said.
Exactly. And that participation might look a little bit different.
Right.
It's just a matter of making the accommodations that are necessary, right? So, a couple of years ago, we had a girl by the name of Laura on the podcast, and she was actually an Olympic diver that way, and she ended up winning a
Mm.
medal, but she was injured. She had broken a bone in her foot that way, and she was unable to train leading up to the competition. And what she did was kind of walk through her routines in her head mentally that way. And she was still able to perform at a level high enough to get an Olympic medal, like going against some of the best athletes in the world. So
Wow.
there's something about that concept of just mental repetition that kind of keeps your performance up. Maybe not the physical side, the conditioning might disappear for a little bit. We can get that back, but keeping that mental side sharp. Going back to what you mentioned before about the hidden opponent, after all, right? Like the mental side of performance is often overlooked. And even taking it a step further, I picked this up from some of the lacrosse guys that we worked with on a podcast recently. They talked about the concept of just general walkthroughs, right? Like, hey, you're a couple months out from ACL right now. Yeah, you can't go out there and cut full speed. You can't do split dodge and roll dodge, but hey, could we have you walk through the plays? Could we have you walk through the kinds of things that you're going to be doing? It's a slower speed. Yeah, we can pick up that pace later on. At least now you're just going through the motions and going through the repetitions, and that's far better than nothing.
Totally agree.
Yeah, and I think that the more you kind of think outside of the box and get creative with how you engage athletes as it comes to practice, the better off they're going to be. I think it just enhances your quality of life. And I think it comes back to just being able to look at athletes as people just like the rest of us, as opposed to just looking at them as these like performance vessels on the, pitch that way, for lack of a better way to put it.
I completely agree. There's a lot of ways that you can go about it, and it's just finding what fits best for that person.
You also mentioned in relation to the first injury that after about 3 months you switched PTs and you felt like the PT that you were going to just was not meeting the needs that you had that way. What did you find was good as it relates to a rehab experience that way? And what kind of things do you feel made a rehab experience less than optimal for you? Or what kind of things would you recommend to someone who's looking for a physical therapist to help them recover from a similar injury that way?
Definitely. I think it's first of all finding a PT that can meet your goals. So like example, right? If you're an athlete, like you need to go back to doing all of these things, cutting, pivoting, like contact and all of that. And I just noticed something that, wasn't very optimal for me was just doing the same exercises over and over until 3 months. Like it was the same like leg raises, the same heel slides, the same bending the knee, whatever that was, like clamshells. And I was like, I just feel like I'm not getting stronger. Like I had not seen any progress in those 3 months, except for like the functional ability. But like muscle wise, I was like, I don't know, like I feel like my quad is still really weak and I just did not feel confident. And I actually came upon Steph Allen. I don't know if you know her, but she's a very common ACL figure in like the social media realm too. And I found her Instagram and I was actually like talking to her for a little. And then I was like, oh my gosh, she goes to a clinic that's 10 minutes for me. And it was like crazy. So I ended up going, I went to Boston PT and Wellness for like a year actually. And I rehabbed with her for a little bit, rehabbed with another PT Rob, which was awesome. And they just, right off the bat, we were doing quad extensions. Like right off the bat, we were like, oh, they were like, you haven't really done quad extensions. I was like, not too much. And they're like, oh my goodness, all right, we're gonna get you going. And we did, I like was sweating. Like after like the first couple session, I was sweating. I was like, wow, I haven't sweat like this in forever. So finding PT places that challenge you, like meet your expectations, meet your goals, listens to you, listens to what you want out of it. And like I cannot emphasize enough, like if you aren't being challenged, you need to be communicating that with your PT. Like if you're feeling like you're in a plateau too, like it's okay to talk about that and to communicate it. And then finally with my last PT place, they are just hands down, I spent an hour and a half there, like per PT session, just working out, just sweating. So that gives athlete, like if athletes are looking, they want that sense of being athletic again, like go to a place that's going to really push you and make you better.
Yeah, a place that's going to push you and make you better, but also individualize things to what you
Definitely.
need and
Yes.
hear and listen to any and all of your concerns that you might have. Because, to the point that you made, if your first PT was willing to have the conversation, listen, and adjust, things might be a very different story right now. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. I find a lot of times, for some reason, I don't quite understand it myself, but a lot of people feel like, hey, I'm a clinician. I've got this degree or this certification or whatever, and they feel like they're the boss and they're in charge. And I just personally disagree with that. Obviously, we're here to help, but we're ultimately here to serve the athlete that we work with. We're more like a guide or a Sherpa, if you will, along that journey than the captain of the ship, in my opinion, right? You have the
Mhm.
opportunity to pack up and leave whenever you want. You can go wherever you want. If you find a better PT, go to that better PT, right? Like we're just here to guide you along that journey and process, if you will. And I think a lot of times people misunderstand that. And to your point as well, I think that there needs to be places that are specific for athletes. I don't think every rehab facility is equipped to work with high level athletes. By the same token, I don't think every rehab facility is meant for the older adult or someone struggling with like a neurological condition or something that way. I think that we really need specialist places because all of these different diagnoses and conditions, and even just people in general, are all drastically different. And I don't think we can take them all and put them into one place and expect the outcomes to be good, right? Your generalist approach is probably great for someone who's, 65-year-old with lower back pain, but it's probably not great for someone trying to return to sport or return to some of these different higher level things that we mentioned that way.
I completely agree.
On that note as well, you mentioned about the overall importance of finding someone that's willing to progress you that way. I also think that concept of being willing to advocate for yourself and knowing what you need to a certain extent, right? Like I'm willing to bet, I don't know you that well yet, Katrina, but I'm willing to bet you spent so much time reading online about ACL and learning about like how do I get back from sport and different things that way. I see a lot of people go down these like Google deep dives, for lack of a better way to put it. And it's like,
Mhm.
you almost have to do that nowadays. You almost have to go out there, learn a lot on your own, and advocate for yourself, unfortunately, because there's just this misunderstanding that exists within the space. And even, experts will disagree on certain different things as it relates to ACL rehab. So ultimately, I think that a big thing that you mentioned and you did really well is just kind of like advocating for yourself and standing up for yourself that way. But I'd imagine that's really difficult or scary to do at first, especially when you're, 17, 18 years old, facing your first major injury, a major surgery, knee hurts, it's swollen, you're not sure what to do or where to go, but you want to get back. Like it's got to be a little bit terrifying, I'd imagine, to take those first initial steps that way.
Definitely. And like, I think finding legitimate figures or legitimate sources is going to be like true. Like, there's something where people say, right, there's overuse of information, but it's honestly just filter failure. And like, people don't know how to filter the really good sources, the really good, PTs, such as yourself, such as who I mentioned, like Steph Allen. She is the one that, like, I was looking at her content and I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Like, everything she said was like, it just resonated with me and I was like, wow, like I just wish I had, utilized more sources like that. So if people are home too and they're like they don't even know where to start, like looking at people such as and like finding certain PTs that, can teach you a little bit more, or find real sources online, not just what you see on Instagram and like believing it.
You have also got this unique thing where you're facing the same injury a second time. And you mentioned, as soon as you felt the knee go this second time, you knew what it was that way. What do you feel you're doing different this time around than the first time? And what do you feel is going better for you this time? Or what kind of things did you learn from the first time that is helping you through this second rehab course that way?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is listening to my body and also just doing what I can and not freaking out about pain. Like in the sense of like knowing when pain is good and when pain is not good. Because that was the hardest thing for me first time around is being like, "Oh my gosh, like my knee hurts. Does this mean I like retore something?" Like blah blah blah. Like and this time around, I'm kind of doing the basic necessities that I know. Like, for example, like I know that you want to come into surgery being really as strong as you can, right? And then after surgery, getting that full flexion, getting that full extension, quad activation, all those things, and knowing what it feels like knowing when, like I said, if the pain is a good pain or if the pain is a not great pain, and I feel like something's off with my knee. And again, listening to your body, not getting so frustrated in myself if I'm not doing PT every single day, because you really don't need to be doing PT every single day when you get to a certain stage in your rehab. If you do like good workouts, right, you need to recover. Like you need to eat the right things, you need to rest your body. Don't always keep pushing it, even though that athlete mentality is like, oh, I'm gonna go, 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 go. No, sometimes you need to kind of rest it out and you need to work hard and but also rest just as hard as you work, you know?
You mentioned, you said the term eat the right things. And one of the things that I wish existed in this ACL rehab space is a more like comprehensive interdisciplinary approach where it's not just PT, AT, and maybe a strength coach, but maybe could we lump a sports nutritionist or a sports psychologist into that
Mm.
picture as well? Because I think there's a lot of other difficult conversations that need to be had about some of those other things. And, unfortunately, I can't provide for everything for every person all the time. So I think the more you kind of lump in different disciplines in there, I think the more some of those other boxes that you mentioned will get checked as well.
Definitely, they're all connected.
On that note as well, you mentioned about the hidden opponent earlier that way. What kind of athletes do you work with within the hidden opponent on campus that way? And what are kind of some of the stories that might be comparable to yours that way? Because I'd imagine that there's a lot of other people just like you out there facing a lot of different things and frustrations. And I'd imagine there's something really powerful in that kind of like support group or community-based environment as it relates to the mental health component of, recovery that way.
Yes, so we see like all kinds of student athletes. They can be on club teams, they can be on regular teams, they can also be former athletes, which we really do emphasize people who are former athletes too. Like, and it's honestly open to the general student population mental health because everything we talk about in our meetings can relate to things in sports and outside of sports. For example, burnout, right? You got burnout in work, you got burnout in school, you got burnout in sports, identity crisis. That can be something where, we like to cling on to things that give us meaning and kind of make it the only thing. Whereas, like, again, that can be work, that can be a certain hobby, it could be a certain sport. But we really talk to a bunch of different people. And I think that it is definitely inspiring because people bring up different topics, right? Like in relation, when I was going through my like transitioning out of sports, identity crisis type thing with my injuries, we talk about those in meetings, and a lot of people are in their senior year and they're like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like what am I supposed to do outside of sports? And it becomes a really difficult and long but important journey that you have to take. And we try to emphasize to just start early, like right, like you don't always need to be reactive with these things. The whole point of our club is so that people can be proactive and not have to reach, you know, down at the bottom and have to build their way up, and instead they can, maybe do a slow drop if anything, right, but then be able to get right back up again. So people bring all sorts of topics like identity crisis, body image, like I mentioned, burnout, and dealing with parents or coaches. That's huge as well because, people come with all different sorts of things that they, struggle with or want to work on. So,
I love that you brought that up because one of the biggest things I see making a difference for individuals in their rehabs that way, and this is regardless of what they're coming back from, is the support around them that way. And I find a huge difference when someone has a great family environment and great family support. They get to every PT session, hey, yeah, they have a $20 visit copay, but don't worry, we'll take care of that. We'll
mhm.
do whatever it takes versus comes once a week, hey, support isn't great, doesn't always have a ride to PT. Why is this important? I don't think they need this anymore. They'll be fine. Like there's a huge difference in the outcomes that are associated with that family support element. And I'd imagine, to your point, that's just very difficult to process, and it can
Mhm.
be very frustrating for the athlete to try and walk through that. What exactly inspired you to start the Hidden Opponent chapter on Endicott College's campus? Like, was there one thing that happened to you? Was it the ACL that you experienced the injury with in high school? What was kind of the light bulb moment for you to say, like, look, I need to start this as a freshman on campus?
Yeah, so I became a campus captain for the Hidden Opponent the summer before I was a freshman. So I already had my feet in the water in that sense, where I found the Hidden Opponent. I watched like Victoria Garrick's TED Talk, which was awesome. And I was like, I need to become involved in this. Like, this is exactly how I feel. They're describing everything with how I feel, and everything that I thought that I knew was not what I knew at all, basically, because Victoria was talking about things about like how, athletes are supposed to do this and this and this and this, and how nobody talks about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how does she know what I'm thinking? And so I became a campus captain. I got involved with like, they had all of these resources on how to start a chapter at your school. So I was like, okay, like I have the instructions. All I need to do is find the people and make it happen. So I got some of my really close friends to become involved in the club with me as well, and proposed it when I got on campus, like in October. So it was pretty early. And right away, too, I noticed with the Endicott campus specifically was that it is heavily populated with student athletes. Like more than 50% is student athletes. And there was like no, I guess, nothing like the Hidden Opponent on it. I think there was something in the past, but there wasn't anything currently. And I was like, okay, well, I just went through that, my ACL injury, still recovering, but I was going through all of these things with it. Like I mentioned, identity crisis, some isolation, all of those things. And I was like, other people have to be feeling this way. Like I cannot be the only one. And I just didn't want other people to have gone through what I went through and feeling like there was nobody around me that could understand, because that was the biggest thing for me in high school. And I was like, if somebody gets injured or if somebody's going through anything here on campus, I want them to make sure that there is a community for them to go to that is student led, that can talk with them, that can understand, that they can kind of support one another. So that kind of inspired it.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, like you probably ran into this as well, they don't understand what you're going through, right? Like
Hmm.
there's probably a lot of athletes or teammates or friends or whatever that were just like, well, you had the surgery, your knee's good now, right? Or what,
Yep.
it's 7 months, why are you still not able to play, right? Like there's a huge disconnect there, and it just adding that on top of all the existing mental frustrations and just fatigue that you face that way, it kind of becomes like, the straw to break the camel's back, so to speak, that way. So I think having those kind of systems in place, those support groups and so on that way is really essential that way. And one of the many things that I respect about you, Katrina, is you took what happened to you, which by many accounts is a terrible thing, right? I don't think anyone is ever cheering when they hear that they tore their ACL, but you turned it into something incredible, and you had that obstacle that was in your path that led to 9 to 12 months of just an absolute grind to come back that way. You turned that into something really positive and impactful, and bettering the lives of other people now because of that thing that happened to you. And I think that there's something, I don't really know how to word it, but there's something powerful about that ACL rehab process where I find people come back and they're almost like, in a way, they're like, I'm a better person now because I came through this, or I overcame this now and I'm a better person in X, Y, and Z. And there's something about that process of just, grinding for like a year and working on yourself for a year and all accounts that way, and what that can do for you later in life. Did that kind of help shape the exercise science route too, or was that kind of like an afterthought or?
I think it just like kind of solidified it. I was always interested in it, and I always knew that I wanted to kind of be interested in it before I actually tore my ACL, because I had a lot of injuries like before my ACL too. It was just constant. But that kind of solidified it. And I was like, okay, well, now I can actually be down in like, down in the grit of it and being like, okay, this is one of the worst injuries like in, for athletes. So I was like, time to experience it and to just see, what others go through. So
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I mean, it's one of those things like you mentioned, or like I mentioned, you really just grabbed the bull by the horns. And again, you took something that happened to you and decided, this is not what's happened to me. It's what I choose to become from it that way. And I really respect that. And I respect that
Oh,
you
thank
did
you.
that. And I guess, we were talking a little bit before we jumped on this that in the future you're possibly considering something within the rehab space or the physical therapy space. That way, what do you feel you've learned from going through this experience twice now that you feel is going to help set you up for success as a clinician that way in the future?
Ooh, I definitely really emphasize seeing the person as a whole and not just, this is another patient, right? Like they have this, but what other things are going on in their life, right? Like not a lot of PTs obviously have the time to be like, okay, like how is, practice or how is this? But I think really understanding that if especially if you're working with an athlete, like viewing them as a human first, right? Like noticing those other factors. How did you sleep? Like, did you eat today? Like things like that, because those mental and psychological factors heavily affect their rehab and heavily affects, right? Like if they're going to return to sport. Like you can't, right? Functionally, their knee might look good, but psychologically, their brain still could be, really unconfident about going back. And that's so important in ACL rehab or in rehab in general.
Yeah, I completely agree. You have to treat the person as a person. And I think a lot of that too, just like you mentioned, a lot of it comes from your actions, but a certain element also comes from the language that you use when you're talking with someone. And I find
Mhm.
a lot of times coaches completely overlooked or clinicians completely overlook the wording and vernacular that they use when they're working with someone. And it's like, words have meaning and carry a lot of weight sometimes, and you never know how deep they can cut. So understanding like, just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean it's okay to like, say something that might put someone else down. So it's this never-ending pursuit of lifting other people up in more ways than one, physically, mentally, emotionally, and so on that way. And it's funny because, we've said the term physical therapy so many times, but it's only partially physical, as we've mentioned and as we've alluded to. And I think that's where the element of, again, like the mental health component and so many other things really comes in to enter this picture, and we need more of that comprehensiveness. I've said that a couple times now, I realize, but I just think the more interdisciplinary we can make it, the better off we're going to be that way. Tell me more about the basketball career. What does the future look like for you in that? Are you returning to the court next year? Are we going to put on a coaching hat? What does the future look like for you?
So, fun fact, right off the bat, when I was actually injured, I got into coaching. And I had a really awesome coach that kind of immediately took me. And he was like, You know what? You're going to help these kids." And I actually have been coaching since. And I even do, like, I coach at another place now where I run like clinics every week as like the head coach. And I do like one-on-one workouts. And obviously, I've been managing the women's team as I was injuring. I was managing the team, but I was still playing on my own and I was obviously training to get back. But I came to the realization that, like, I definitely I was getting a lot of reward from that coaching aspect. And although I think basketball is something that I'm always going to enjoy playing, whether it's, pickup or like summer leagues or something like that. But I obviously have one more year left of college and, weighing the pros and cons for me personally, I don't really feel like going through another, injury if that's the case, and injury in general, honestly, because I think I filled my time with other things. Like, again, when you feel like you get injured, you have an identity crisis, but you learn to fill those things back in with other things that matter to you. And that's really important. So I'm not like fiending to get back to playing as I once was, because I just found passion in other things like coaching or like doing the hidden opponent or like even hanging out with my friends more, like having more time to just like chill out. Like that's been really nice. So
You mean you can have a life and do all
yeah,
these
you can
different
actually have
things?
a,
It's
yes, you can
incredible. My
actually have a
goodness.
life.
And on that too, I think you travel quite a bit as well, don't you?
I definitely do. I try. I mean, I'm actually from Jordan, so we travel to Jordan like every other summer. We were just in Italy last summer too, so it's been nice. It has been really nice not having to worry about, practicing or like working out every single day, but instead working out because you get to and because you get to just move your body and feel good. So,
Yeah, tell me a bit more about the travel. What has traveling internationally taught you about life, cultures, people, sport,
Ooh.
anything, all the things? Fill me in about this.
Honestly, like I don't know. I think sports in general just are a like or movement or fitness in general are a blessing. Like even when I was in Jordan, I found a basketball court, right? Just for fun. Like I wasn't really doing anything. And there was a lot of these other kids that were there too. And like I just started to play with them and teach them oh, teach them how to shoot a basketball and like how to dribble. And they were just so excited. And I was like, they don't care like if I start on my team. They don't care if I'm on a basketball. Like they're just having fun and they like to just learn from me because you can take these skills from your sports and apply it to anything in life. Like I nothing is going to take away from the fact that, I learned how to shoot a basketball or I learned how to dribble or I learned how to run or jump. But now I can take those and apply it to other things and just like have fun with it. And being in a different country too, it's just like over here, I think we have a lot more accessibility to things, right? Like you just go down the street and there's a gym, or you drive like 10 minutes and there's a gym. But over there, it's like they don't have 500 gyms. They don't have, pre-workout 24/7 or like protein powder and like saying, oh, you need to like bulk up and like blah, 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 blah. But it's just like they just like move because it's just fun and like they get to be with people and socialize and like, I don't know. It's a definitely different environment, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, it definitely is a different environment, but I think that kind of worldly view or worldly perspective, for lack of a better way to put it, gives you a new appreciation for things that way. To your point, that way, I've met a lot of patients or a lot of people, I should say, that feel that they need a certain setup, a certain amount of equipment, or something fancy to get results that way. And it's like, a lot of times there's someone in the world making it work with far less than you have that way. I think a lot of times people underappreciate just how much they have access to and just how much
Mhm.
they can do with what they have that way. And I think it kind of takes getting out there and getting into a situation where you realize, hey, these individuals here are making it work and they have none of the things that I have access to every single day. So if they can do it, I can certainly find a way to do it that way. And I think it makes the days that are a little bit difficult because everyone's going to face hard days. I think it makes them a little bit less challenging because again, it's like, yes, this is a trying time, but hey, I know a bunch of other people that are working through something far worse right now. Not to say what I'm going through is not, a bad thing that way, but it's, hey, other people are strong, other people are working through this. I can do that too. And I think that there's something about that concept of, people working through hard times together that just kind of helps add that motivation element because I think ultimately from the motivation side, whether it's rehab or sports performance or just sport in general or whatever it is, it has to come from within that way. And I think the more you kind of get out there and experience different things, the more you develop that intrinsic motivation piece.
Definitely. You got to get out there.
I also noticed, like, plain and simple, I think everyone's kind of picked up at this point. I connect with a lot of people through the power of social media that way. What role has social media played in this ACL rehab process and so on that way for you? Are you someone who's like, entire TikTok algorithm is people recovering from ACL at this point? Or walk me through kind of the social media side of this.
It has its pros and its cons, right? So some of the cons I would say is things like comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy. We've always heard that, but it really is. Like people, like especially when I was recovering, I would see, oh, why is this person 2 months post-op and they're already like walking, or this person is, it looks like they're never struggling. Like, why am I struggling? Or, seeing all of these day in the lives of a perfect life of doing this and doing that. It's all fake, it's all filtered. But some pros is seeing the real stuff too, and seeing some people, some creators are real with their stuff. And I know at least the TikTok content I post, I try to have both sides, to see the good days, to see the bad days, but also having a community. Like you see in the comments, right? You see one ACL video on your feed, go to the comments, like scrolling of other people. Oh, I'm 9 months post-op. I'm 6 months post-op. I'm 3 months post-op. Like it is a whole community. And even when I was going through my first rehab, I was actually in an ACL like Snap group chat that I found on TikTok. And it was great. Like we were texting on there. They were like, "Oh, like I have this like going on. Is this normal?" And someone would be like, "Oh, that happened to me." Like, and it was just great. And I was like, "Okay, like if I'm if I'm uncertain about something, especially my first recovery, like I can just text in this community and like I got it through social media and it's just great. So it's really just finding the real stuff, like I said, and like finding your community on there.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because I had never thought about like Snapchat
Yeah, it's
communities.
crazy.
I don't I, I'm really dating myself here. I had Snapchat when it first came out. Never used it. Like I'm pretty sure my Snap score is like 60,000 or something ridiculously low. All the kids laugh at me. So I've literally deleted it because I just don't use it anymore. I didn't even realize that there was like groups for things like that out there. Like that's really incredible and impressive. And obviously, there's plenty of people out there smarter than me that were like, you know what? We should put this together and we should make this a thing because it's gonna, do some good for people that way. So I absolutely love that stuff like that is available now. And to your point, a lot of people do make it about the highlight reel. And I do think that everyone should kind of, if you're going through something difficult, I don't care if it's ACL rehab, hip rehab, shoulder rehab, whatever, like document your journey. Maybe you don't post it publicly, maybe you don't share it with the world, but just do it for yourself to kind of be able to look back and say, oh my goodness, look at how far I've come. Look at how much progress I've made. Look at how hard I've worked. Look at, wow, I was back here at this point and this was really challenging. Now I can do that all day long, no issue that way. I think there's something powerful about being able to look back retrospectively and just kind of see that progress. And it's funny because there are some people I worked with that made an Instagram profile, a private one, and they
Mhm.
only allow their own account to follow, their personal account. So they kind of
Oh.
post all that stuff to that one little private Instagram account, and it's all there. They can always look back at it if they want to or need. But it's just for them. So I think that there can be some power about like just flipping that social media side to make it all about you instead of all about everyone else. Because while, I mentioned earlier, you do a phenomenal job of taking what has happened to you and having a great impact on others around you, there's a certain element to that where you have to be able to take care of yourself and make sure you're not pouring from an empty cup at the end of the day.
Completely agree.
What was the biggest self-care piece that you took away from the ACL process, and what did that self-care routine look like for you? Were you into like journaling or meditation or like Epsom salt baths? Like, I don't know. Everyone does something different, but what does that kind of self-care look like for you?
Ooh, one of the things that I actually had a doc of my ACL recovery, and I would just journal, I guess you could say, on there, because I can never stick to like the pen and the paper journal for some reason. It's just like I don't always have it on me.
Yep.
But with that, I would have it like on my phone or on my laptop. So if I'm like, in the waiting room of my doctor's office and I'm nervous, I just boop, write down what I'm thinking and don't have to really think about it. So things like that, where I could write down how I'm really feeling on a doc, and like, I think there's something very special about that because you don't always know what you're thinking until you write it down and you're like, oh, wow, like I didn't realize that this was what I was actually thinking. So I think that was big for me. I was doing that especially a lot in the beginning of my recovery. So
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And I think that, again, going back to the retrospective piece, it's great to have something to just be able to look back on and just kind of recognize all that you've been through and all that you've accomplished and all that you've overcome. Because I find a lot of people are far stronger than I think they realize the majority of the time. They just haven't taken the opportunity to look back and see just how far they've come.
definitely, it's very empowering to be able to look back and be like, okay, I've been through that. Why can't I get through this?
100%. Trina, as we start to wrap up here, is there anything that we missed or anything else that you want to share in relation to your journey and all the incredible things that you've been going through over the past several years that way?
I'm not sure. I think I would just, if people are listening to this, I would just say, like, you are not alone and it is okay to feel all of the feelings, but just know, who's supporting you, and to also know that your sport does not depict you and that this injury, it's a blessing in disguise. I kid you not. You are going to come out a whole different person from it in a good way.
I completely agree. And obviously, it sounds like you have a great wealth of experience going through this multiple times, but also surrounding yourself with other individuals who have faced trying times and you're all kind of banding together to work through them. Where can people find out more about you, the hidden opponent at Endicott College, and all of the incredible things that you're doing there?
Yes. So we have, so the hidden opponent at Endicott, our Instagram is THO_Endicott. And then my Instagram is Katrina_Haddad, Haddad. My TikTok is Katrina.Haddad. So pretty similar, but
Yeah.
post some content on there too.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link to all of that in the description below too. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and see everything that Katrina and her crew at Endicott College are up to. Katrina, this is amazing. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for everything.
Of course. Thank you so, so much for having me. This is awesome what you're doing.